The Crimean Bridge has become an object of continuous bans during the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine. After 2 attacks by the Ukrainian Armed Forces, almost everything is prohibited on it, from taking photos and videos to being on certain sections of the bridge. Fines and troubles threaten both tourists and the bridge guards, but this does not stop selfie and blog lovers. Krym.Realii found out. The bridge across the Kerch Strait was built by Russia after the unilateral annexation of Crimea, contrary to the position of Ukraine and its partner countries. Along with civilian logistics, it also provides Russia with the delivery of military cargo and personnel in the context of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As Russia continues its military actions against Ukraine, restrictions for the Kerch Bridge are becoming more and more numerous. Today, it is one of the most closed objects in Crimea, despite the active traffic on it, but this does not guarantee its complete secrecy. After the opening of traffic on the Kerch Bridge in 2018, the most common violation on this bridge crossing was stopping vehicles for selfies. Rose Abtudor stated, "The arched passage and entrance from Taman broke records for popularity among tourists who were not stopped by warnings from transport security units. Violators were threatened with fines of 2,000 to 3,000 rubles for stopping on the bridge. Since Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, restrictions on the Kerch Bridge have increased significantly. There is essentially a double ban in place. On the one hand, it is due to internal regulations. On the other hand, it is due to a ban on filming transport infrastructure as part of the medium response regime that has been in effect in Crimea since October 2022, when the first explosion occurred on the Kerch Bridge. In general, this bridge crossing has restrictions that do not exist at other similar sites in the Russian Federation. Each vehicle, passenger and baggage is thoroughly inspected. Taxis carrying passengers are required to have a special permit, and truck drivers are required to have waybills and cargo documents. On the Kerch Bridge, stopping on the bridge crossing outside the vehicle and baggage inspection zone is prohibited. There is also a complete ban on photographing and video recording of objects and their publication. Russian authorities have previously called on people not to use mobile phones while crossing the bridge. The toughening of penalties for filming on the Kerch Bridge was facilitated by the Moscow-controlled Crimean authorities. They proposed a complete ban on photography and video filming there until the end of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. "I would generally ban all filming there as long as the current level of terrorist threat remains," said Vladimir Konstantinov, Speaker of the Russian Parliament in Crimea. It is prohibited to photograph the Kerch Bridge from both cars and train carriages. The Russian carrier, which provides rail service between Crimea and the Russian Federation, explains this by transport safety considerations. According to passengers of the Tavria train traveling from Crimea to the Russian Federation and back, while the train is moving along the Kerch Bridge, they are not even allowed to walk around the carriage. In the conditions of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, the Kerch Bridge served as a means of not only civilian but also military logistics. Fuel and personnel of the Russian army are transferred to the southern fronts of the mainland of Ukraine via it, the Ukrainian Armed Forces say. After the Ukrainian Armed Forces struck the bridge again in the summer of 2023, the Kerch Bridge began to be reinforced with various structures and heavily guarded. The Russian authorities are taking maximum measures to illegally protect the facility, and so far there are no signs of a decrease in their activity, says Dmitry Pletenchuk, spokesman for the Ukrainian Navy. According to him, in 2023, 10 to 14 ships and boats were guarding the Kerch Bridge at the same time. This facility has been maximally saturated with modern air defense systems.
Syria's interim president was in the Turkish capital on Tuesday for talks expected to focus on Syria's economic recovery as well as the presence of Kurdish-led forces in the north of the country that Turkey considers to be a security threat. According to Associated Press, Ahmad al-Shara, who was appointed interim president last week, appeared to have been welcomed in Ankara with a low-key ceremony compared to other heads of state, who are usually received with military bands and mounted troops escorting them on arrival. Al-Shara, the former rebel leader who headed the insurgents who toppled President Bashar Assad in December, is making his second international trip following his visit to Saudi Arabia. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan greeted Al-Shara, who was dressed in a suit and a red tie, an apparent nod to the Turkish flag, with a small group of the honor guard at the entrance of the vast presidential palace complex. Turkey was a strong backer of groups opposed to Assad during the country's 13-year civil war and is considered to be one of the new administration's key allies. Erdogan's office said talks would focus on steps toward Syria's economic recovery and its security and stability. Turkey, which shares a 910-kilometer border with Syria, views the Syrian Kurdish militias that make up the key component of the US-allied, Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, an extension of the banned Kurdistan Workers' Party. It is pressing for the group to disband. Turkish-backed fighters are currently battling the SDF in a bid to push the Kurdish militias away from the Turkish border. Mazlum Abdi, the commander of the SDF, said in an interview with the Associated Press on Sunday that he recently met with al-Shura in Damascus, adding that the two sides are negotiating with the help of mediators to find compromises regarding Syria's future, including the future of the Kurds.
There are no official contacts between Russia and the US on Ukraine, but Kiev fears that Trump and Putin have already agreed to remove Zelensky. For now, from the negotiations. Political writes about this, citing Ukrainian officials. In Ukraine, the Kyiv junta's main fear was confirmed, which is that the US and Russia will agree behind Zelensky's back, completely excluding him from the negotiations. And this is a possibility since both Moscow and Washington consider him illegitimate and also incapable of negotiating. And then the US and Russia almost simultaneously spoke out in favor of the need to hold presidential elections in Ukraine. In general, Kyiv believes that Trump and Putin have already agreed to remove Zelensky, removing him from the negotiation process. Some representatives of the political elite of Ukraine went even further and suggested that this could be followed by the physical elimination of the Kyiv clown. He knows too much. The convergence of Washington and Moscow's positions on the election is worrying. I see it as the first sign that Trump and Putin agree on one thing. They want Zelensky out. The publication quotes one of the Ukrainian officials as saying, Zelensky himself is trying to win Trump over to his side, but he can't get a personal meeting with him. So he acts through interviews telling how bad Biden was and how well Ukraine will live under Trump. He also understands that power is slipping out of his hands. US President Donald Trump said that discussions involving Ukraine and Russia are making progress, though he provided few details. We have meetings and talks scheduled with various parties, including Ukraine and Russia. And I think those discussions are actually going pretty well, Trump told. Trump's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, suggested that both nations would need to make concessions to negotiate an end to the war. President Volodymyr Zelensky has already indicated that he will soften his position on land. Kellogg reportedly said, according to Radio Free Europe / Radio Liberty, and Russian President Vladimir Putin is going to have to soften his positions as well. He added that discussions would continue in the near future, calling negotiations good for both sides. Zelensky has repeatedly ruled out any deal that would involve ceding territory to Russia, which currently occupies around 20% of Ukraine's territory. Some of this land was taken during Russia's 2014 invasion, while the rest was captured following its full-scale assault in 2022. However, as Ukraine faces mounting battlefield losses, pressure is growing on Zelensky to consider compromises.